I hope you had a great break, and I hope you're ready for our second session starting very soon. Yes, hello. I can see a lot of hellos coming in the chat box. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see you here again. I am really excited to start our second session, and I would like to invite Miss Zarina Subhan onto the stage. So Zarina, could you please turn on your camera mic? Perfect, thank you so much. Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thank you so much. We have thousands of teachers in this room today. We're super excited for your session. I'm just going to give a quick introduction of your bio, and I'm also going to get your slides up.
Perfect.
So Ms. Zarina Subhan originally graduated in the sciences and naturally crossed over to the world of EAP/ESB over 30 years ago. Since then, she has taught at all levels and worked worldwide as a teacher and teacher educator. She has experience working with educational policymakers, NGOs, community leaders, local and state governments, and universities in continuing professional development. Nowadays, Zarina is a teacher educator, writing, delivering workshops, and speaking on a variety of topics. She was also a plenary speaker for ITEFL 2024. Her passions are the neurology of learning, CLIL, CPD for teachers, and inclusive and sustainable education. So Zarina, whenever you're ready, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Kathy. I'm coming to you from Ho Chi Minh City because I arrived in Vietnam just 2 days ago. So it's wonderful to join you here, and thank you for joining me. So without further ado, I'd like to make a start on how teaching global skills through English is a way that could really engage and help motivate secondary school level students. Okay. Hello to everyone, and thanks for keeping the chat box lively. Nice to meet you too. Okay, here are my aims today. I've got 3 aims, which I hope to get through in the time that we've got together. I'm going to try and keep a little bit of time back for questions at the end. So do put your questions in the Q&A chat if you have any. Okay, so we're going to look at secondary students' abilities, overcoming fear and anxiety with CLIL, and cross-curricular skills. Just to start with CLIL, for anyone who's not sure what that is, I'm talking about content and language integrated learning when I refer to CLIL, okay? So first then, let's think about secondary students' abilities, shall we? So when we go from primary level to secondary level, we actually develop, and our brain is more capable of thinking in abstract form. So at a primary level, we have to be able to touch and see and understand things that work right in front of our eyes. Abstract form is actually quite difficult for the primary level brain to cope with. But by the time our students reach secondary level, they're fully capable of thinking in abstract form. They're more reliant on friendship groups than they were at the primary level. Primary level, you're still really fully dependent on family life to feel the feeling of friendship and safety in families. Whereas at secondary level, you're moving into a newer kind of confidence, and you form really strong friendships at secondary level. And because of that, those friendship groups, you influence each other a lot. So you want to impress your friendship group, and that becomes more important than impressing your family group at this age. You're also exploring worldviews, which makes you a little bit more curious about the world. You may start to question things that you had just assumed were correct before, or assumed were normal before. And that makes you more independent than you had been previously. You also start learning about yourself. So you have a sense of individuality. You have a sense of who you are in the world, your place in the world, or who you want to be. And that helps you to challenge the norms that you had accepted before. And that can sometimes be what makes teenagers a little bit difficult for us adults to deal with. But when we step back and think about it, it's actually a very positive process that they're going through, of just deciding what it is they believe in and want to be. And because of that, they wish to take a little bit more control than in the primary years. In the primary years, they're quite happy to be told what to do and how to do it. Excuse me. However, at the secondary level, they're wanting a bit more of that control. And because of that, they're curious about concepts. They want to know more about concepts. They have a sense of belonging to a friendship group, or maybe a sports group or an interest group. They maybe are joining fan bases if they like K-pop, or if they like Taylor Swift, or if they like gaming, or if they love football. They are starting to belong to groups of people who they identify with. And that makes them less reliant on family. And because they're less reliant on family, they're willing and able to try out new things that may not be normal to their family members. They're wanting to actually give it a go. They may start questioning the systems that we live in, whether it's political systems or systems of behavior, or systems of living life. And they may also begin to dislike too many rules. So they may start reacting against too many rules. And that's the danger in a secondary classroom. If you're teaching with too many rules in place, without too much movement or volition taking place, then that can create issues, and you may come across a barrier with secondary level teachers. For that reason, because of all of those reasons that I've just been outlining, teenagers won't like rote learning. They'll be frustrated with very repetitive tasks. They will probably get bored with vocabulary lists and grammar explanations they might find cumbersome and demotivating. They won't necessarily like the teaching to the test if you're preparing them for a test. And if something doesn't have a clear relevance, they may start to question it. So why are we doing this? And that may feel like it's questioning your authority. But I think it's important to remember it's not actually about you. It's about them. It's about the process of change that secondary school students are going through. So they're not actually questioning you. They're questioning the system of why do we need to do this. So it's really important not to take things personally. Now, let's have a look at this. Here's an example of an activity. Student A says, "What color are my shoes?" And student B says, "They, or your shoes, are yellow," let's say. Okay. This is a perfect example of oral practice taking place, right? But what I would like to point out is that this kind of activity may be repetitive if they have to ask everyone in their class what color their shoes are, just to practice the structure. Or something like, "Do you like coffee?" or "Do you like tea?" That kind of activity done again and again and again is very repetitive, and they may react against that. They may not like to do that. And that's really because this type of activity is oral practice. And what I want to distinguish it from is communication. Oral practice does not equal communication. Oral practice is just practicing a sentence structure in an oral form. So maybe asking questions and answering questions. But you wouldn't normally go around asking people what color their shoes are, or if they like tea or do they like coffee. You might ask if you had invited someone to your home and you ask them, would you like some tea or would you like some coffee? That might be a different kind of thing, yes. But that would be it. You would only ask the question once. You wouldn't repeat it, yeah. And so these kind of things are important to keep in mind, that when we're doing activities in the classroom, it's important for you as a teacher to distinguish between whether it is actual practice or if it is real communication. Okay. So going from there to overcoming fear and anxiety through CLIL. So, when CLIL was first talked about, which was actually in the late 90s, it was referred to as having the 4 C's. And the 4 C's referred to content, communication, culture, and cognition. If you were listening to David Marsh earlier on, he was one of the father figures, if you like, of CLIL. One of the founders of the term, and he would often talk about the 4 C's. However, once CLIL kind of really got going, it was also known in terms of 21st century skills. But Oxford University Press have looked at it in a different way. They said, okay, for 21st century, what do we need? What are the skills that would be useful? And this was right at the start of the century. And Oxford University Press talked about it in terms of creativity and innovation, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. Now, we're 26 years into this century, and with hindsight, we can actually see that these things are really important in this day and age. Creativity and innovation is essential in this day and age. Communication is vital. Collaboration, I think you would probably agree with me, I hope, that during the pandemic, collaboration was super important because we were working suddenly in a virtual world, online, doing all kinds of things right across country boundaries. And we had to think critically and come up with new innovative ways of working suddenly overnight. So I think Oxford University Press actually were very precise in coming up with these areas to develop in students. But something that Oxford University Press are very good at doing, I feel, and I'm talking in terms of a freelance who works in terms of consultancies with OUP. So I don't work for or belong to OUP, but I do respect the way in which they are constantly developing ideas. And what they did was they developed the ideas from 21st century skills, and they said, okay, we're in the 21st century now. What do we really need? What does it mean working in the 21st century? And they came up with a set of skills called global skills. And here we've got an example of the global skills that OUP talk about. And these are the representations in a visual form. And as you can see, there are 5 of them. And I want you to think about, what do these images represent to you? Okay. What does number 1 represent? What does number 2 represent? 3, 4, and 5. And you can see the clues in the images. Okay. And just have a look at them. I'm going to give you just a minute to have a look and think about each one. And I would like, if you could, to just take some notes on number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've got some thoughts coming into the chat box already. Thank you for that. We've got teamwork, we've got connection, cooperation, we've got critical thinking, we've got cognition, thinking again, connection. Oh, the chat box is moving really quickly. I'm going to try and keep up with you if I can. Thank you for all of your thoughts. That's great. Somebody mentioned individuality and multicultures, which is really nice. Yeah, technology is mentioned. Some nice thoughts there coming in. Positive thinking, inclusiveness. Brilliant. I do like all of your ideas coming through. Thank you for being so active. I do like that. Participation, your participation is really important in this, so thank you for that. I'm going to show you the next slide where I'm going to give you a little bit of a clue. Okay, here we go. These are the 5 titles for those 5 images that you were looking at. And I got your schemata going, so you're already thinking along the right tracks, which is wonderful. Now I'm giving you a huge clue to each of them. Could you complete them? So number 1 is communication and, oh, Mai has done all of them. That's fantastic. Wonderful. Wow, you're really on the ball, everyone. Fantastic. I like what you're saying. Just going to give you a few more seconds to think about them. Wow. Great. It's amazing to be with you, the Vietnamese secondary level teachers, because you've all got your thinking caps on. You're all very spot on and with it this morning. Excellent. I'm going to share with you the answers, as it were. So we're talking about communication and collaboration, creativity and critical thinking, intercultural competence and citizenship. So that's what the relevance in the umbrella has different flags, if you look closely. Digital literacies, emotional self-regulation and well-being, which many of you got. Great. So I think you will recognize that all of these are really important skills in this day and age, especially. And communication and collaboration. So to be able to communicate well, you actually need to work well together with someone, whether that's with someone physically in the same room as you, or if it's even online and they're on the other side of the planet as you still need to be able to collaborate with them, to be able to work well together and have good communication with each other. Creativity and critical thinking. Critical thinking, often people think is to criticize, but that's not what critical thinking is about. Critical thinking is about taking a step back and just asking yourself, why is it like that? And should I be doing it this way, or is there a better way? So it's helping you to see different perspectives on a particular problem to create a solution, to come up with a solution. Intercultural competence and citizenship is to feel that you are part of both your local environment at the same time as being part of the global environment. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to understand and work with people from different cultures and different perspectives. So intercultural competence is really important to enable you to be a citizen of the world. And the idea of citizenship is also a sense of responsibility, that I am an individual, but I also have an impact on my environment around me, the people around me, and the world as a whole. Digital literacies couldn't be more important than it is today. There's so much discussion about AI, about multiple intelligences online, about the use of fake news and algorithms. And so we need to make sure our students are digitally literate and able and ready to use the social media that exists, the forms of research on the internet that exists, and to be able to actually judge for themselves and be able to evaluate whether this is a piece of information I can rely on, or is it completely fake, and how do I tell the difference? So those are important skills. Emotional self-regulation and well-being, tied very much to digital literacies. A lot of young people are having issues with self-regulating how much they use social media. They're feeling the pressures of having to be perfect on various platforms on social media. There's a pressure to be a certain kind of person, or to look a certain way, or to eat and drink in a particular way. And that is beginning to harm the mental health of a lot of young people. So working with secondary level students on such things is really important. And CLIL, content and language integrated learning, can actually use many of these topics through English to teach them about how to be in the 21st century, how to have a balanced life, and be a balanced individual, but also be able to use their brain and think for themselves, and not to fall into the trap of believing everything that they may see on social media or that their friends may be doing. To be able to actually assess, evaluate, self-evaluate, reflect, and then possibly change the way they're doing things, or be curious to learn new ways of doing things. And I've actually been in Vietnam for just 2 days, but I visited Vietnam some years ago, actually, on holiday, around the end of 2007 and 2008. And I've noticed a big change in terms of the availability of foods that are vegetarian, for example, right? So I can see that Vietnamese society has reflected on the diet, on what they eat, on nutrition, and is actually there seems to be a big change in the way people are eating and drinking and lifestyle choices that they're making. And these are all really important evaluative, reflective, critical thinking skills that help in terms of self-regulation and well-being. So I can see that Vietnamese society is really rich in some of these competencies already. So it's really important that we can help students with that. So these are the global skills that Oxford University Press are referring to when I'm going to talk about global skills. Okay, and because of these pressures that exist on society, there's a lot of fear and anxiety, but also in the classroom. And Lawson Freeman said that it's not that you learn something and then you use it. It's neither that you use something and then you learn it. Instead, it is in using it that you learn. They are inseparable. So this is the idea behind learning by discovery, learning through doing, and experiential learning, where we can integrate reading, writing, speaking, and listening through an activity where they are learning about possibly a topic such as mental health and well-being, and they're learning about themselves, they're evaluating things around them in society, and they're learning English at the same time. All of them combined strengthens that learning process, very much like Larson Freeman referred to. And Gardner said that current formal education still prepares students primarily for the past, rather than for possible worlds of the future. And we're talking about being future ready in this conference, in this online conference, and that's really important, I think. If we stick with an education system that we've always used, then what we're doing is we're basically thinking about what we needed in the past. So it's time to reassess what we're doing, evaluate it, and think, okay, how do we make our students future ready? What skills do they need to be able to be ready for what is to come? Now, obviously, we can't predict the future and say, okay, this is how it will be. But we can provide our students with the skills that they need so that they're able to cope with whatever they're facing in the future. And here's an example of what I'm referring to in terms of content and language integrated learning, is where we're using the topic of etiquette. Okay. And this is based around social media, digital literacies. And we're talking about when you greet people. Okay. So this is about intercultural norms as well, intercultural understanding and acceptance. So we accept that people are different. And when we greet people, how do we greet people? Should we use more formal language when speaking to an older person? Should we kiss a woman on the cheek? And why is it a woman and not a man when you meet her or him for the first time? Should you use your partner's parents' first names? Culturally, what is it like in Vietnam? And then you can maybe find out and discover what is it like in other cultures. So that could be a follow-on activity that we do. Men and women, talking about the differences, what are their roles? If you go out for a meal, who should pay? Should it be the man? Should it be the woman on the first date? Should you wait for a woman to go through the door first? Should you accompany a woman home to make sure she arrived home okay? What are the normal ways of doing things? And you can talk about how it is in Vietnam and practicing explaining how it is in Vietnam, so that when you come across a visitor to Vietnam, your students are actually able to talk about these things and help the visitor to get accustomed to how it is in Vietnam. So you're helping someone with their visit to Vietnam, but also you're helping your students to have the confidence to have such a conversation should they meet a visitor who's here for the first time. And then you've got a similar set of examples about when you're having a meal with a friend. Should you have your phone on the table? Should it be on silent? Should it be off the table? Is it okay to make a call? All of these things are engaging topics for secondary school learners, because maybe their parents are telling them, oh, put your phone away, or maybe their parents are guilty of always being on the phone. So these are things that we can discuss in a safe environment in the classroom, have a different set of opinions, but you can come to an agreement at the end. Yeah. So by teaching our learners global skills, we're equipping them with life skills that go well beyond the language classroom. And I think you would agree that such skills are important, not just for English language learning, but also for the future workplace. How you talk to someone who is not of Vietnamese heritage and doesn't understand the culture. How do you explain things about your culture? How do you ask questions politely about another culture? These are all important, and we learned that from the pandemic when suddenly our working life went online, and maybe we had to suddenly work with people from other parts of the world online, and we didn't know how to interact with them necessarily. Before, we learnt about intercultural communication in the possibility that we visited other countries, but now everything is online, that we don't even need to leave our country to be communicating with people from different cultures. So it's even more important now, I would say. So such skills are important for the workplace, for research, for study, for tourism, for business, and these are very important life skills. And here's a quote that I found in the Vietnam News on the 7th of March last year. So this time last year, from the Ministry of English Language Training. Speaking and learning foreign languages, especially English, is a crucial tool for deeper integration with the world. And I think that's absolutely right, that Vietnam has decided that English should be a second language, not because anyone wants to stop Vietnamese people speaking Vietnamese or even other ethnic languages, but it's because if Vietnam is going to be integrated into a global society and be successful on different levels, whether it's trade, whether it's sports, whether it's research, whether it's studying abroad, for any of those things, you need to integrate yourself. And for that, English language is a perfect tool to do that, because there are more speakers who are using English as a lingua franca, meaning that they're speaking second, third language speakers of English with other second and third language speakers of English. You don't need English to speak to a native speaker anymore. You need English to be able to be an international citizen, because that's the perfect tool to speak to anyone from any background or culture or country. So Vietnam is basically preparing itself to be a strong member of an international stage, basically. And I think that's really important to have that in mind, that you're not teaching simply English as a language. You're teaching English as a tool for your students to be able to enable themselves to learn anything they want, to start things, to be innovative, to form working relationships with other people around the world, to enable them to be able to do whatever it is they want to do, whether they're going to work in a call center, whether they're going to be a waiter in a restaurant, whether they're going to be a cab driver, whether they're going to become an engineer or research, it really doesn't matter. English is useful in all of these spheres and more. And so we could start thinking in terms of engaging our students by thinking about what other cross-curricular subjects could I overlap with? And because at a teenage level, students want maximum relevance to them, they may start to question, oh, why are we doing, why are we learning this tense in English? They don't want to study English grammar because they don't feel like that helps them learn. It's just a set of rules, yeah. And just as you are saying that English is an international language, they want to learn English so that they can use the language to do what they want to do, right? So it's a tool. Maybe they're interested in gaming and they want to chat with their gaming friends in English, yeah? Or maybe they're Liverpool football supporters like me and they want to go to the fan base and chat with other Liverpool supporters, yeah? Whatever their reasons, we could start to engage them and motivate them by doing things in a cross-curricular way. And I don't know if you're aware, but on the 22nd of March coming up is World Water Day, International World Water Day. And water is an important commodity. And we need to be aware of how we use it, why we use it, why it's so important, and how water is an essential molecule in our world for everything, from our biological reactions that happen within our body, to the survival of plants, to how water is being affected in terms of climate change. All levels, water is a real essential commodity. So we could use English to explore World Water Day. So it could cover science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which are STEM subjects. So in terms of science, we could look at the water cycle, the water molecule, states of matter. How does water change from solid when it's an ice to liquid when we drink it to a gas when it evaporates? We could think about technology, all the ways of water collection around the world. What are there? There are reservoirs. There are huge water tanks. Water could be collected from fog and mist in the hills and then transformed to water. There's water harvesting, forms of collecting rainwater that falls on the rooftops and collecting it in containers to water your garden, for example. It could then be filtered and used for drinking water as well. Instead of just letting rainwater wash away into the drains, we could actually reutilize it and be more sustainable with our water. Mathematics, we could use water in terms of measuring. We could measure rainwater. How many millimeters of rainwater did we have this month? We could measure how much water we use in our actual homes. Do we waste the water? Every time we flush the toilet after we've been to the bathroom, how much water is used? When you wash your clothes, could the wastewater be used for something else instead of it just going down the pipe? So these are all possibilities in which we can explore. And if we add art to that, we have STEAM. So we can have STEM and we can have STEAM subjects as well. So, for example, on World Water Day, you could ask your students, if they have a mobile phone, you could say, use your mobile phone or use your parent's mobile phone, with permission, of course, and capture an image related to water in your environment, anything at all. So you're allowing them to be creative. You're allowing them to be curious. And then you could say, come back to class and let's present your images that you've found and discuss all the uses of water or the images related to water. And you could get them thinking, just so that World Water Day becomes a day in which they become conscious about water and respectful of water as well. You could discuss Vietnamese, the attitude towards water. Does water have a special place in Vietnamese society? Are there any religions in Vietnam that treat water in a special way? Is water seen as a purifying natural force? You could discuss the way water is used in terms of producing electricity, hydroelectric plants, which would go in terms of technology, engineering, and science as well. You could get some data on how many hydroelectric plants are there in Vietnam. Are there any turbine engines which are run from steam, for example? You could use mathematics in terms of data collection, showing data on a graph, but the connecting topic is water for all of these. So through the topic of water, we can explore all kinds of different specialized worlds, but the whole time we are using English to do so. So that's an idea for having STEAM in the classroom and using that as a springboard, if you like, to find topics and explore activities. And right at the beginning, I was talking about how students want to have less control, that they don't want things imposed on them so much. So here, you could actually give them choice and say, okay, our topic is water. You could introduce some ideas, you could do some reading, or you could have a listening or watch a video. And then you could say, let's do some group work where you are finding a project. It could be a project-based task that may run over a few weeks. And the base idea has to be about water, but you can be in control and you collaborate with each other, you communicate with each other, you are creative, you think critically about how you're going to do your project. You are using your knowledge about the world, but you are also using your digital awareness to find out more information. And you are evaluating critically whether that information is reliable or not. So all of these global skills come into play around the project, and you're having it much more student-centered. And you as a teacher are letting go, and you're letting the students have a little bit of freedom, but you are still guiding them. You can work closely with the groups and say, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to present your project? It could be with a poster. It could be artistic. It could be a set of images or a recording. Maybe a group might do a video where they go to the local temple and look at how water is used and why water is important. They could interview their grandmother, for example, and talk about how much it used to rain in your town or city before when they were younger, and how much it rains now and what the changes has been. And then the group could do maybe a project on climate change in the area. So there's a whole world of activities that your students could choose. And that way as well, the students, they can identify the strengths in their group and say, okay, you're really good at digital tech stuff, so you can do our images. You're really creative, so how about you go away and get some images for our tech person to put together. And that way, within the group, they use their strengths, and they also focus on they have a lot of respect for each other, and realize that everyone has different strengths. They recognize the different strengths, and they recognize that maybe I can't be good at everything, but I am good at this. So that improves their confidence, their self-esteem, and it helps the group work together, and they have to be responsible and collaborate to do their part of the project, but together their project comes together. And this could be all online if you wish, or it could be presented in class. You could involve the parents and invite them to come in to see the posters or the projects that have been done or the presentations that the students may deliver. And that engages the parents as well and sees how well that their child is progressing. And if it's a project like that, the students can see that they're combining different areas of learning and knowledge together with English. And that can be part of their portfolio. And a portfolio is a collection of work that a student does over a whole academic year or a term. And they can see the progress themselves that they're making when they collect their work together. So these kind of ideas for cross-curricular activities are really fruitful in a secondary school setting. And it also allows you as a teacher to collaborate with other teachers. So it could become a whole school project where the whole school celebrates World Water Day. And that engages everyone, which gives the empowerment to the whole school that we are a community working together. And that can really give a really nice, positive feeling for the school. It empowers the students to feel like they're playing a part and their part is being recognized as well by the whole school. If you're interested in finding out more about global skills, this is a QR code which will take you to the eltoup.com website, and it takes you to an expert paper on global skills that was published and is made available publicly. All you have to do is register on the site. Basically, OUP like to know which part of the world are accessing which papers so that they can actually provide more useful information. So do take a scan of that if you wish, and perhaps one of the moderators could help to put that in the chat later on so everyone can have it, and maybe a link as well, I don't know. So that's there. And if you don't have your phone to hand and you can't take a scan, all you have to do is put in Global Skills, Creating Empowered 21st Century Learners, OUP, expert paper into Google, and it would also take you straight to the site. Okay. So I've managed to cover those areas in terms of teaching global skills through English. And I am happy to take any questions.
Hi, Zarina. Thank you so much for the session. We have a few questions already coming in. If you could please look at the Q&A tab under priority.
Great.
If you start reading anything, I can maximize it onto the screen.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a question. I've just seen your STEM lesson with water. What other topics can we apply in secondary school? Yes, so many topics. For example, you could look at soil erosion, for example. You could actually do a hands-on practical activity where you have, do you know those milk bottle containers with a handle? You could kind of cut it open, put in soil and have it tilting. So it's at an angle like that, for example, right? And then you can pour water in and see how long does it take for the water to come out of the mouth of that bottle. Yeah. And it can be an experiment. So you're saying, okay, we've got one with soil only. You pour water in, you measure from time of pouring to time of water coming out, and you record the time. You could have a second bottle with something growing in the soil. So you could have just small seeds growing in the soil, which was planted earlier. And again, pour water in, and then you time how long does it take for the water to come out. And then you could have the seeds that are grown into tall plants, which are quite bushy with lots of leaves, do the same thing. So basically, you've got 3 types of bottles, and you're timing how long does it take for the water that you pour in to come out at the other end. And that is a perfect way of showing how when you have plants in soil, then there is less likelihood of water causing landslides, soil erosion, and you are protecting the soil. So that's you're teaching about sustainability, you're teaching about soil erosion, you're teaching about the importance of planting trees on a hillside. And at the same time, you're doing mathematics because you're timing, you're calculating how long it takes, and you're looking at the difference. So that's basically STEM, another STEM. And then you can actually ask students to go around and take photographs of areas in their environment where you think may be susceptible to landslide and why they think that. So then it adds in photography. You're bringing in skills and the world from outside. They're using language for meaningful purpose. So that's another one. There's a question here, should we create a bilingual book? Absolutely not. No, you don't need to do anything half as complicated, because if you're using meaningful language, that language is being translated in the student's head. We don't need to be using a second language. We don't need translation, because the students, through doing what they're doing, they're cognitively understanding what they're doing, that you are using the English language to describe it, and they are beginning to replicate that language. So they appreciate and understand what words mean, and they're using their own cognitive processes to translate themselves in their own minds. And when they're working in groups, they're actually teaching each other. So they're saying, what does this mean? I didn't fully understand. And another student who may have understood it in a different way can explain it or describe it from their own perspective. So from having student-centered activities like that, they're learning from each other very much. So no, I would say forget about the bilingual book. How can we apply STEM activities effectively? I think I've covered that, so I'm not going to address that one. How can teachers evaluate students' competencies when they participate in this STEAM project? Yes, great question. Evaluation is important. So what is important to keep in mind, I would say, is that you're not just evaluating the English, but you're evaluating how they collaborate. You're evaluating their skills in negotiating, participating, persuading each other to do things. You're also evaluating their level of critical thinking, of their creativity, their curiosity. How well have they used digital technology? You're also thinking about how well did they work together? Did they fall out? Were there arguments? Or were they able to self-regulate themselves? Were they able to cooperate and collaborate together? Did they work well as a team? And their well-being, have they been able to step back and reflect on their learning processes? So there's lots of things that can be evaluated, which means that as a result, that what happens is students don't start to think, oh, I'm no good at languages, because they're doing different things through language. And they begin to have the confidence of saying, actually, English is a tool and I can use it to do what I like. I really enjoyed just going out and asking people questions, even though the questions they asked were in Vietnamese, maybe to get a survey. When they came back with the questions, they were able to take the data and explain it in English and say, this many people said this, and this many people thought this, and I think it's because of this. So their rationale and their evaluation skills are able to use English to describe those things. So you can evaluate different things at different times, at different stages of a project. And when they're finally presenting, or they have a product like a brochure or a poster, or a set of slides, at that point you can actually evaluate their English. Yeah. But along the way, there are lots of things that we could be evaluating. I'm looking at the question about critical thinking again, that says it's the fact that a lot of students are lacking critical thinking because they're not fond of reading books anymore. They don't like to study literature or maths as well. They just love something funny, fast. They want to get good, immediate results without paying too much effort. So how can we help them if they don't have motivation to learn something? Yes. I think it's true that maybe they're not fond of reading, but we can encourage them to read, because if they can see the purpose of reading, so they can see that to be able to present something, they need to know a little bit of background about water, for example, if we think about World Water Day, they realize that if I'm going to do this well, I need to go away and read. So I think it's maybe too general to say they're not fond of reading. I think it's because they don't fully appreciate the need for reading. But if we give them a reason to read, they'll do it. And if they want to do a really good project, or if they want to show a presentation in front of their parents, for example, they will do it. So it has to be motivating enough. There has to be a motivating reason. There has to be a purpose, and they have to be engaged with the project that they're doing. And I believe they would read. And if the reading is just research, it's better than nothing. It's okay if they don't sit down and read a whole book. But if they're reading information off the internet, that's okay, I think. There's a question here. Would you say CLIL becomes the most dominant teaching methodology in the future compared to the others? I think CLIL can become one of the successful methodologies, purely because I really believe you can reach more of your students. You can engage more of your students, not just students who seem to be naturally good at English, or maybe you have students who are higher up in the socioeconomic level, and therefore they have the ability to travel, or they have better internet, so they connect in English websites better than others. And that's a disadvantage. Whereas if you've got motivating topics that you can teach through English, then you're going to engage more of your students. And CLIL, as David Marsh said earlier on, it's not a methodology that is only for the elite classes. It can appeal to all levels, whether it's vocational, whether it's academic, whether it's just regular state secondary school students. It's a methodology that can appeal to different kinds of students. So in that sense, I think it can become a very useful tool. Whether it should be dominant or not, I don't think is important. I think basically if it's a useful tool for teachers, it should be used. But it can be used in combination with different methodologies like total physical response, like communicative language teaching. They can be combined. I don't think we have to stick to one methodology. I just think it's a tool. How can I teach STEAM collaboration? in collaboration with grammar? Well, I think that's a really good question. STEAM topics can bring out language, and your job as a language teacher, after they've done a project, is say, do you realize you were using this part of language when you were talking about the process of water going from gas to liquid to solid, for example? And we can just highlight the fact that we use simple present to describe universal truths which exist in our world, that is always acceptable. So water is a liquid between which temperatures? At which temperature does it turn to ice? So we can use grammar to pinpoint language later, to highlight it, and to increase their noticing skills, and just remind them when we're dealing with descriptive language or universal truths, we use simple present, just like you have been doing already. So they get to use it, they experience using it, they're comfortable using it, and then your job is just to highlight and say, look what you did. This is all the things that you did. These are the skills that you learned. And by the way, we were dealing with simple present because that's what we use when we're talking about universal truths. So we can bring grammar in, but it doesn't have to be at the heart of the whole language learning process. It's just one element. Whereas traditional language teaching, we start with the grammar, we bore the students with all the grammar explanations that there are, and then we say, okay, now you're ready to use the language. But actually for secondary level students, they just want to use the language. They just want to get into the action and be excited and be using skills that they have already. They don't want to be dealing with the grammar. So just by doing it at the end and say, this is what you've discovered, this is what you've been doing successfully already, and we call it the present tense, is enough.
Hi, Zarina. I think we have time for just one final question. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to pick the question that's about remote areas. There's actually a couple of questions, I think. Can it be applied for students in mountainous or remote areas? Very much so. I lived and worked for 3 years in the remote area of Nepal, in the Himalayan region, where there was no electricity, there were no telephones, there was no running water even. You had to go and collect your water. So it was a really remote area where I was living. And I used STEM. For example, there were families who were cooking on wooden stoves, and they were using wood, and the room was full of smoke, which affected the heart and the respiratory health. So we did this project. It was a project-based learning with different levels of classes, and we had a cross-curricular activity of building a smokeless stove. So the older classes looked at the effect of smoke on health. Grade 6 looked at using passive voice and writing a description of how to make a smokeless stove. And the primary level classes they collected the material and they used it in mathematics and said, okay, we need so many kilograms of dried grass, we need so many kilograms of mud, we need so many liters of water, and we need so many kilograms of cow manure. And then we have to mix it. And they did it hands-on. So they made the raw materials. The grade 6 level made the instructions, and the grade 9 level looked at reasons why we needed a smokeless stove. And then together we made it hands-on. So they learned how to make it. They went home to their families and they taught the families how to make a smokeless stove. So this was a really successful project. We also had tree planting projects where we distributed little seedlings and everyone was given a seedling to plant near their home. And it was like a reforestation program, but done through the school. And they looked after their trees. They learnt what the tree needed, what conditions it grows in, how much sun it needed, how much water it needed, where to plant it. And then they looked after it. And then they took, we had a way of taking pictures. We gave them a camera to share. And they took pictures of how their tree looked after 6 months, how it looked after 1 year, if there were any other things growing on the trees, did the birds visit the tree? And that was another kind of portfolio project that we did with the photographs. So just because students may be in remote areas doesn't mean that there isn't any science, technology, engineering, or maths, because in our everyday world, we actually use these skills, but we just don't realize it. We don't think about it. You could do something as simple as, how many steps do you walk to school? Who has to walk the farthest? For primary level or for lower secondary. There are lots of things that you can actually analyze, and it can become STEM or STEAM. That's part of everyday life. How many hours in a week do you spend collecting water, for example? How much rain does it fall in a mountainous region compared to a non-mountainous region? So we can bring in their environment and their world into the classroom. It doesn't have to be about an abstract world that they know nothing about. We can use the world in which they live in.
Thank you so much for that fantastic sharing, Zarina. And also, thank you so much for the teachers for being so active in the chat box. We
They were
really
great.
appreciate your engagement. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Zarina, please feel free to say a few final words before you exit the room. And after that, please feel free to turn off your camera and microphone.
Okay, I just would love to say it's been fantastic being with you here in Vietnam, and I'm really positive about how interested the teachers are. You've been so active and some fantastic questions. So I think the future learning in Vietnam is going to be great. Just looking at the caliber of teachers that we've had today. So thank you for your attention and your participation, and thanks, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Zarina. See you
Bye,
soon.
everyone.
All right, thank you so much to all the teachers for all your engagement throughout sessions 1 and 2. We're coming to the end of today's conference, and I would like to ask all the teachers to scan the QR code in the screen or click on the pop-up that you can see on your screen. This is to collect your feedback for session 2 with Zarina.